Hey Deep Chatters, I'm Leah Morris here with my co-host Jennifer Butler, and this is Deep Chats Podcast, where we have raw discussions about real life. Each week you can expect unfiltered, no BS conversations from the heart about topics that actually might matter to you. We're just a couple of relationship coaches who want to cut through the small talk and dive deeper. So thanks for joining us on this journey, and be sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. Hey, Deep Chatters. Welcome back to another episode of Deep Chats Podcast. I'm super excited about today's episode because we have our first male guest, who's actually a really good friend of mine, Nate Mezmer. I met Nate about 3 years ago via Instagram, which he's a bit of a, I feel, Instagram wizard when it comes to starting up communities and connecting with people and just rallying that common collective energy together. Nate is the creator of City Fit Fest, which is where I met him, and the brand ALLNESS. I have one of those t-shirts. It's great. He's an event producer, a community creator, as I mentioned, and a strength and empowerment coach. And today, Nate, welcome. We wanted to talk to you about masculine and feminine energies and a bunch of different ways that that's really being affecting things right now. But before we get into that, maybe you could introduce yourself and tell everybody about you.
Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I've always, maybe the word struggled is a good word, struggled a little bit with introducing myself in terms of what I was going to share in terms of what I do. Because sometimes people are very confused, like, what do you do? Like, they don't always understand. I have never really had a quote traditional, 9 to 5. In college, I was a history major and a track and field athlete, and I began to produce events in college surrounding live music and community gatherings. And it was mostly hip hop music based, some house music based stuff, but it turned into a job. Was not my intention, but that's what happened. And that's a really long story there, but it took me through a lot of different pathways from, throwing traditional, nightlife parties to creating music experiences, live music experiences, to doing everything from block parties to music festivals. And at the same time, when I was in college, I was also very politically active along the social justice lines. And this was, to put it in context, this was right around 9/11 and the war in Iraq. So I got very involved in a lot of that. So then later on, I was also involved with events surrounding political things, not necessarily just, getting politicians elected, but giving people voices to speak on different things. And then we use music and art and things like that. So that was an incredible experience. I did that for many, many years, and I'm still doing that in certain ways. But about 3 or 4 years ago, I started to shift my lifestyle towards more health and wellness. I had always been very active in terms of fitness. However, fitness is not always well. Oftentimes it's not well. And I was doing the boom and bust cycles of work hard, play hard, maybe partying on the weekends, or my job was in a party atmosphere or a celebratory atmosphere. So then I'd spend the next several days recuperating, and then I'd try to work my way through the people have the Sunday blues, right? If they party a lot on Friday and Saturday, and then Sunday they're not feeling very good physically. So then mentally, all these things compound and they get anxieties, and maybe they don't like or love their jobs. So then it adds even more to it. And then we spend like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday getting back to normal. Perhaps we're working out really hard, so we're trying to sweat it out. And then all of a sudden it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday again, and we're doing the roller coaster ride. And I did that for a while, and thankfully I moved past that transition. It took a while, but over the past 4 years or so, I've transitioned, beyond that. And I started to produce health, wellness centric events or experiences, or at least creating communities or gatherings or groups that were focused upon wellness, fitness, health. And then that became the ALLNESS concept, which is ALLNESS, fitness, mindfulness, and then putting it together for greater wellness. And the goal there just being that I think that can be an entry point to shifting things for people individually and for larger communities and groups and potentially countries and worlds and all that. And it's a very powerful entry point, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you went from doing, things I'm just kind of like looking at the timeline that you just gave, and you kind of went from doing things with a much more, I guess we could say, like, masculine approach to gathering people into something that was a little more holistic and emotion-based and mentality-based, but sort of the marriage of those two together. It's kind of interesting to see, you went from one end of the spectrum to the other, and then just found this like really nice middle ground where I feel like that's kind of where the magic really happens, is in the marriage of those two polarities.
Yes. I'm very much in the process of discovering that right now, and have been for the past couple years. I would even go through times where I was like so anti patriarchy that I would, like the concept of femme the future. I do agree with femme the future, and practicing things that are more open-minded and more collaborative, more about cooperation, a lot more listening, and more creativity that's well received, so people can be themselves. But sometimes I would maybe veer so far in that direction where I would be very negative about certain things that have to do with masculinity. And I realized from reading, listening, talking with friends, generally women friends, and also, reading and listening to professionals and just coming up with my own ideas, that my ideas of what masculinity have been negative, because that's kind of all that I am generally been exposed to through my life. I haven't been exposed very often to concepts of masculinity that were strong but loving, mm-hmm. and open-minded but protective, right? It's generally just been flex, project, right?
Yeah.
Project toughness, and everything is top down, right? The head of the household, the head of the country, the head of the company, the organizer of the movement, right? And when I was doing stuff before, it was very much usually like that. And I got things done, when I was like in charge all the time, but I started to realize like I didn't really like it. One, you can get a lot more done when you do it with other people. And you can also do it with more eyes and more ideas. So when I was first, to answer your question, going back to when I was first doing it, it was sort of just about me being like resourceful and like, I'm going to make this thing happen. You know, no one else is doing this. I'm going to make this happen. And I think that's a really good value, a really good skill, that I wish more people were empowered to feel that way. So, growing up, for example, as a man, as a boy, especially a white male, I was more or less encouraged to climb a tree, build something, get dirty, perhaps break something, climb the roof, jump off the roof, you know, and explore and stuff. And I'm not saying that young girls or women weren't necessarily allowed to do those things, but I would say it's more common for boys to be, you know, accepted to do that, especially white boys in America. So I was allowed to like explore and like just kind of like figure things out and be like out front on that type of leadership, I would say. But and that was very valuable. But then as I went forward, I one got sick of the vibe in the more like music, entertainment, nightlife events, because it was very top down. It was male dominated. It was closed-minded. It was unhealthy. It was very sexist in general, right? Like the sexist norms of like a nightclub, for example, right?
Yeah.
Like it's super strange, right? Like, okay, men are supposed to like buy the drink, you know, and then women often go to these clubs to get the free drink, but then men think because they bought the drink, they're owed something, right? And then if you even take it to the front door, men are generally always in charge of who gets in.
Right.
So then it's really even more skewed. Like the guys are waiting in line, and then like, who are the pretty girls? We're going to let them in first. Right. So it's like this fake, it's like a fake privilege. It's like, oh, we're getting in first. Well, you're only getting in first because some guy has determined your value based on how you look and what they're going to potentially get from you. Right.
Yeah.
And then the whole dynamic just plays out with loud music and like tons of booze and potentially drugs and all kinds of crazy stuff. I am not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing. Like I think, you know, nightlife culture has its place. It creates a lot of different arts and talents, and people meet. I have a lot of friends that I met within those scenes that awesomely enough have moved on to a more wellness centric lifestyle, and I'm continuing to be engaged with them. And then the ones who haven't, like I've essentially lost touch or cut ties. But moving into a wellness, health-minded, health-conscious space, I started to realize, like, again, to answer your question, Leah, I started to realize, wow, if I want to create something that is real and inviting and helpful to people, it can't be this like, you know, tough guy thing where like it's all about like, you know, big muscles or like how like many, you know, reps you can do on a bench press, or like the bodybuilding centric fitness. And also not the aesthetic based fitness that is sold to women now and for a long time. And I started to realize, like, oh yeah, like women are generally the ones leading the way within wellness, within mindfulness, in terms of the more open-minded, accepting styles of wellness, fitness, lifestyle. And women are also more open-minded to try new things in general. So when we started to produce these events, I realized like I can't have like a bunch of guys involved, like really, to be honest. I need more strong women involved. And I mean, that opens up a whole nother conversation of where I'm going with things now. But again, to answer your question, when things are top down and it's this one singular person, that's leading, that's in charge, that's creating, that's controlling, it's generally like more like a dictatorship, right?
Right.
And even if the person who's in charge is a woman, if the structure is patriarchal and the value systems are that way, then it'll be reflected in the feeling of the experience. Mm-hmm. If the one person that's in charge, whether they're man or woman, if it's like, oh, we're going to do this in a collaborative, cooperational way, and we're going to like put people in charge of what they're good at and like let them shine, and it's not about one person, then everything changes.
I have a follow-up, or do you go ahead, Jen?
No, I was just going to say, because it's so interesting and it makes me sad, the way masculinity really is looked at now. And I hear you saying it with this like top down, and it's like when you say like a masculine man, people automatically go to this stereotype of like, right? And like drinking beer and watching sports and can't have an emotional conversation, right? And that's not what masculinity is. Like when you really think of the true masculine, right? It's like not top down at all. It's like a grounding force. It's like so rooted in the earth that it's like almost magnetic, right? It's like a force field. And it's just so sad to me that it's become really like directly opposite of what masculinity really is.
Yes. It's much more like the wise elder, in a indigenous sense, where it wasn't about domination. It was about offering some wisdom and letting the younger people take it in for what it's worth and like try to grow with it. It was being connected to everybody in the group or the tribe, or it was understanding the values of the plants and the animals around you, right? And there was a lot of leadership back then. There was women were at equal levels of decision making. There's even examples of groups or cultures, tribes, etc., where there's a council of women that make decisions on certain things, right?
Yeah.
And I think that if we are going to, shift the paradigm, as people like to say, it needs to be more in that council type decision-making thing, where we aren't in a top-down structure. It's a matriarchal approach. It's not about just the individual. It's how's the individual doing? And then if that individual is doing well, and that individual is doing well, and that individual, then the collective is doing well. Right. As opposed to, and then we're seeing that right now with the pandemic, right? If someone is sick and they're vulnerable, they can infect other people. And in many ways, we're only as strong as our most vulnerable. And I think that flies in the face of a lot of things that we've been taught in this society, because everything is individualized often, right? Mm-hmm. And the masculine thing where we project strength, toughness, ego, etc. That's very, very much the norm. And even within our sort of like progress with, workplace norms and stuff, where women have higher roles or leadership roles, still often this projection that's very like masculine in a negative way, often, not always, but projection, I think, is very dangerous, because with masculinity, with men, with boys, like we're told, don't cry, right? don't go inward with your feelings. Like, dress the part, look the part in a way that's all about like strength. You know, crying is for girls. You know, and then we're told, like, if you're weak, you hit like a girl or you punch like a girl. So weakness is synonymous with female, and strength is synonymous with male, and then it just spirals out of control from there. And within fitness and wellness, I think we have an opportunity to address those issues. Where I told one of my classes I was teaching a couple of weeks ago on Zoom, at the end of the class, I said I wanted them to consider the concept of vulnerability as strength and strength as vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I think we can really delve into as a society and as individuals. Like, men in general, if they go inward and become more vulnerable and realize the more that they are with their feelings and the more vulnerable they are, they actually become stronger because they can bend instead of break. And then women, on the flip side, again, in general terms, if they invest more in their own empowerment through being stronger, not just physically, but overall, generally women are better at getting in touch with their feelings and their vulnerability. And if that's the masculine and the feminine balance there, then I'm okay with those categories, you know, where we have a balance of vulnerability as strength and strength as vulnerability.
It's funny that you, just to like backtrack a sec, you were mentioning that like with this pandemic and with, you know, our most vulnerable, you know, we're only as strong as our most vulnerable. Jen and I were actually just talking about this right before we got on this call with you, that there is that tendency to be too individualized. And, you know, I know this is like, obviously is such a hot topic right now. And so I kind of, I don't want to like overkill it here, but I feel like it's really relevant right now to what we're dealing with the reopening of a lot of these things. How do you feel about that? Because I think that, you know, this is really interesting that we're sort of like, okay, finally we can, you know, we can get a little bit of normalcy back in our lives. And then on the flip side of that, there's these, you know, extremely vulnerable people, and potentially having there be like a discriminatory vibe to things of like, oh, okay, only your rights are taken away in this instance. I don't know. I'm just kind of like, I think we're all just really processing things. How are you processing that?
Yeah, I'm definitely on the same wavelength of what I've been thinking about. Many of the words that you used, you know, bring a bunch of different thoughts to my head. First, in terms of me just personally, I cannot complain too much. I have a 1-bedroom apartment in Santa Monica that's not too far from the beach. Even though we're not allowed to go to the beach, we can go to the park. I hopefully have enough money and resources that I'm going to be okay for the duration of the rest of this year, is what I'm assuming this is going to be, or more or longer, you know, in different ways. So I'm very privileged in where I'm sitting, in terms of being able to survive right now. So that is going to shape the way that I'm looking at things. Like, I'm not being forced to go into the streets right now and try to work. And I am also not juggling children at home or anything like that. But in terms of the rush to open back up, and also reflecting on the response initially in general, and our lack of readiness or preparedness to deal with what we've been going through, it all points back into the same general direction, and is very relevant to this conversation, in that the reason why I believe we're rushing to open back up is that we are not prepared nor built to even handle a situation like this. As a society, we don't even know how to slow down. We don't know how to shut things down. I'm not a fan of Trump at all, but he said something profound, I believe on accident. He said something that was basically like, America doesn't know how to shut down. We weren't built to shut down. and I laughed. I'm like, that's completely true. Like, we're just working all the time, nonstop. And we're told that if we just continue to work, we're going to make this money, and we're going to like climb this ladder, and we're going to buy more things, attain more stuff, achieve higher levels, gain more. Like it's everything is like dominance and exploitation based, right? So when we have like an entire society structure built on dominance and exploitation, and a constant achievement, so like the destination always moves. You get to this level, and there's always another level to achieve when we're in that mindset. There can always be more. You get $1 million, you need 10 million. You get 100 million, you need 1 billion, right? It's nonstop. And so when we have that type of like society and those values, like we don't know anything else but to open back up and go back to work. So we're not thinking about things in a smart way, in a wise way, to see like, maybe this is an opportunity to slow down and look at how we can do things differently so that we are not in this type of a situation in the future. The initial response, if you look at a bunch of different things, one, they didn't want to respond because politically it looked bad to deal with it, I guess, or something. I'm not sure why they didn't respond, but we took too long on the response, partly because we're relying on this top-down system. This one guy has to make this decision so that the rest of the people can function. And that didn't work. So then all of a sudden different local cities and different states, different governorships, et cetera, started to like figure it out. And then maybe that didn't even happen. So then like locally, like friends and family and community members had to like figure it out. And the veil was sort of lifted on like, oh, maybe we're not as prepared or as safe or as like strong of a society as we thought, because all of a sudden everything seems to be falling apart. And in that same regard, if you look at who is being affected most, like who's getting sickest and who is dying from COVID, it's people who are older, right? Have potentially not lived the healthiest lives, potentially have worked a ton or still working. They're not that healthy and strong in their older age. People who have immune deficient situations, and they're dealing with that, and maybe they're not necessarily getting the care there that they need. And then you look at like poor communities or communities of color, like in New Orleans, where 70% of the people dying in New Orleans are African American, even though they're only 30% of the population. And then you start to look at health and wellness there, and it's like African American population has, you know, higher rates of heart disease and high blood pressure, and they live in areas where they don't have access to healthy foods, you know, vegetables. There's no Whole Foods there. So when we start to see that, we're like, oh wow, like we live in a country that doesn't invest in the general health and wellness of the individual. We live in a country that invests in the general success of the stock market or like major corporations. That's why we need everyone to get back to work, right? And that's where everything starts to shift if we realize like, oh shit, like if we invest in individuals in terms of their general health and wellness, the community is stronger, there's less vulnerable people. And then when a pandemic comes along, you know, we're not in this like state of chaos. Like we could have, if we lived in a society that was like that, we could have probably shut down right away for a shorter period of time and then had the ability to react, adapt, and go back to normal sooner. But because we don't live in that place yet, it's just complete uncertainty.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because you know, there's even the term, right? Every man for himself, right? Isn't that what we live by? Every man for himself.
Absolutely, right? That's like, think about that idea. It's so old. It's Darwinism, right? It's some old white dude who was like experimenting with like animals and said like, oh, there's like this concept of adaptive radiation and like these ones over here are gonna survive, so they're stronger, and that means they're better. Right. But actually before all that, you could argue that collectives, you know, survived in different ways. Like there was a lot more cooperation thousands of years ago within human beings. But regardless, like let's say there was some points to survival of the fittest, like we've evolved, right? Supposedly, like our technology has evolved human wise. I don't know how much we haven't evolved as much as we think, because we still are doing the every man for himself thing.
Exactly.
Right. And that language is huge. I mean, if every single day we're using those words, whether we realize it, especially if we don't realize it, if we're using those words all the time, there's no way it can't have an impact. Even the words that like, okay, I was a history major, history, HIS, right?
Yeah.
And then we talk about, well, what is your mentality, right? When someone introduces themselves to a group, I started catching myself doing this a few years ago, and I still have not broken it, although I've gotten better. People will always say, hey guys, what's up? And I was like, I started catching myself. I was like, I just said, hey guys, what's up to a group of women.
Yeah.
And if I bring that up in conversation with like the average person, like they'll probably be like, what are you talking about? It's just an expression. And maybe it is, but if you think about it, like, what if, you know, like for you, the next time you're addressing a group of men, say, hey, what's up, girls? How's everything going? And like,
that won't
see
go
how
over well.
yeah, right. See how the reaction is, right? What's up, ladies? And it's a bunch of men, right?
Yeah.
So when we're just like, hey guys, like all the time, and then all these like little words, they add up a lot. They add up a lot, and I think the every man for themselves is a great analogy. Like right now, if we are in an every man for himself situation with COVID, that's not gonna work, right? Mm-hmm. Like we don't have if we lived in a world where we could all like live on our own farm and grow our own food and like stay away from everybody, like maybe that could work. But people are finding out that what they've lost the most right now is human connection. Like
a hug.
Yeah, right?
I just want a hug.
Yeah, everybody's on Zoom, and there's a house party app. There's I don't even know all the apps that are happening, but we're physically distancing more than social distancing because everybody wants community. And if we go to the vibe of just everything is about success in like a material way, we can just spend all our time like work, achieve. And because of modern technology and like you can push a button and like things get delivered to you, you don't necessarily need to participate in community. Whereas like hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago, you couldn't survive without community. And the pandemic situation is exposing like, oh shit, like we need community.
Well, we certainly thrive when we're connected. I mean, we're human beings. We thrive on connection. We're at our best when we're integrated and working together. You know, I even see it in business. I mean, I'm a solo entrepreneur, and you know, I can do great things on my own, but when I come together with other people, when Leah and I create this podcast, you know, it's like suddenly how we're able to impact the world and how we're able to grow as individuals, like expand.
Expansion, expansive. Yes, that's a great word. Community, growth. You know, growth mindset stuff is talked about a lot, right? And I think there's two ways to look at growth mindset. Like, I mean, there's probably more than two ways. There's probably a lot of ways to look at it. But growth mindset, if you categorize growth mindset in a way that's just about economics, right? I'm going to have a growth mindset of abundance rather than scarcity for the main purpose of being more successful so I can attain more things.
Yeah.
That's a different growth mindset than a growth mindset that is looking at things through the lens of abundance and scarcity, and looking at, if I can collaborate with these other people, not only am I going to be able to grow, be more successful, you know, economically or financially or just in life, I'm going to grow these relationships. I am going to grow as a person. I'm potentially going to grow myself on a deeper level. Some people will say grow your soul. That type of growth mindset takes you to a higher level, right? And it's still within the same ideas of like what's possible, getting out of like acting out of either scarcity or fear, right? And if we're in a growth mindset that's always like material based or exploitation dominance based, then it still can be growth mindset in certain ways, but it's such a surface level that it still goes back to doing things out of fear of not having things or not achieving things, I guess.
Yeah, I think too, it's like, it's just a simple like reframing of what we have traditionally looked at success as. Success, growth, abundance, like rather than it being like, you know, like you're saying, the individual, every man for themselves, let's get all the things mentality, it becomes success as community wellness. Like, simple as that. We're only as strong as our most vulnerable member. Success, if we look at it in that way of like, oh, in order to move through this pandemic and look back and say, you know, like we ended up on top here. We ended up successful, rather than it being like, oh, we got the economy back on track. Everybody's working again. Like we had to lose a few to gain a few or whatever. Redefining that as like, I want to look back on this and have everyone with me, as many people as possible at our most, at our highest place, at our wellest, I don't know if that's a word, but our most well, you know, then that version of success, I think, gets rid of that top down framework that we've been using and just sort of like flattens everything out, which in a sense can, I think, it is still growth and it is still abundance and it is still success, just in a different framework.
Yeah. I like wellest. You could say whatever you want. We have to redefine words and make new words. We can go with weller if we want. We can go with wella.
Yeah.
That's right on, Leah. You know, redefining success and winning is how we're going to move forward as a human species. It's as simple as that. If we redefine what we believe or think of or value as success and winning, everything will change. If we're in a zero-sum game of, you know, our rules are like the NFL, where whoever wins the Super Bowl is the winner and whoever doesn't win the Super Bowl is the loser, then we're not going to do well as individuals or as a society. If we look at things completely different than that, for example, let's say I was able to be extremely successful during this pandemic and I did so well for whatever reason. What if all my friends or majority of my friends and family did not so well, or actually are very much suffering or struggling, or perhaps even got sick or passed away? Where does that leave my quality of life if I am doing so well and then all these other people I care about around me are not? If we can expand that to, okay, maybe my friends and my family are doing okay, but like, what if the rest of my neighborhood's not? Or what if like my neighborhood's doing okay, but like the other side of the city is doing really poorly, right? You can just extrapolate that and expand that outward, right? Like, oh, maybe my city is doing great, but the state's not, or the state's doing great, the other state's not, you know, country, et cetera, right? And if we have that more global mindset on how we're doing as a society or as a world in terms of being successful or winning, that will certainly shift a lot of things on how we decide to, you know, value our time, but then also how we decide to choose to govern our local areas and our national, you know, structures. If I am doing well and you're doing well and our neighbors are doing well, and we start to see that as we're all doing well, where does that lead us versus the opposite, right? Why does winning and success always have to be played out through that paradigm of like, whoever stands at the top of the pile with the flag is the winner? There's a quote or a little reading in the Mark Nepo book, Book of Awakening, where he talks about when he's a kid. I guess they used to play this game called King of the Hill, and whoever was on top of this dirt pile like was the king of the hill. And he talked about how he hated being king of the hill because when you're on top of the hill, like all your friends are trying to knock you off the top, and so you have to like stay on a swivel with your head, and you're never comfortable, and you're always have anxiety, right? Because someone's coming for you, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to just like sharing the hill or flattening out the dirt and just, you know, hanging out or something.
I'm glad you mentioned that book. That's actually one of the books that you and I started a conversation about back in the day. Such a great book. We'll include that in the show notes. But yeah, as far as like, you know, what you're saying and going forward, I feel like what could we do just to sort of like tie this all in? What could we do, in your opinion, to take that, you know, what's like the first little step that everyone can take to go from this toxic masculine way of thinking and come to a healthy masculine, healthy feminine way of thinking? What could each individual do as far as like shifting their perspective, even like what are your thoughts?
Well, and bring out the best in both the masculine and feminine instead of bringing out the worst in one another.
Yeah, because we can all embody healthy masculine and healthy feminine. When you say toxic masculinity, that doesn't mean masculinity is toxic. It means that that's generally what we have in a society that's built on a patriarchal system that's toxic. But you know, that doesn't mean that all types of femininity are also healthy, right? Can we like I don't even know if I always like the paradigms that are associated with the things, but like, let's say you associate the masculine with the sun, and it's like shining this bright light or whatever, this heat, And the femininity is supposedly this moon that's like reflective, right? I don't think like in a relationship, it would be healthy if someone was always in the sun position and the other person was always in the moon position, where it was like their responsibility to reflect the light that this person is shining back to them, right? Because then it becomes all about this one person, right? So we need to be able to, have a healthy balance so that we can love ourselves and then love these other people that are in our lives. And that balance will allow us to be happy and whole, right? So number one would be empowering ourselves on an individual level that is based in a deep-rooted understanding of ourselves that's based around first working to love and accept ourselves. And then as we do that work, empowering ourselves in different ways that are healthy and mindful. So if somebody, let's say, is struggling with, loving themselves, it's not going to be very easy or even possible for them to love others. It's going to be very difficult, or the way that they're going to love them is not necessarily going to be the healthiest way. So when we first start with ourselves and then start to build on top of that, these are the most immediate things that we can do. When I talk about strength and empowerment through, let's say, like physical strength, especially like, let's look at that for women. Now, if tomorrow morning we woke up and every woman in the world was as strong as a man, right? For whatever reason, like biologically, men have more muscle mass, and there's all these different reasons with hormones and all this stuff. And that's also measuring strength by muscle mass. There's things that women are very strong at that men are not strong at, in general. But let's just say that women were stronger physically and equal to men when we woke up tomorrow. That would shift the paradigm a lot, because when you're walking down the street at night and it's dark, you're not looking over your shoulder for another woman that's going to come in and potentially attack you or harass you. It's 99% of the time, it's going to be a male. Same thing as a man. When I am looking around, making sure that I'm okay and safe, I'm not looking for a woman that's going to come attack me, right? That's just not how things are. We can just look at statistics based on violence. So strength does allow levels of empowerment for the individual. Looking at women, it's just an entry point though. So you can look at women that are focused on fitness, strength, and aesthetic-based stuff, but they haven't done the psychological and emotional work. And so they project a certain image that's, deemed strong or sexy or pretty or whatever, and they look fit, but mentally they're not necessarily strong, and emotionally their mental health is potentially suffering greatly. So strength empowerment is just an entry point. Then we need to expand to our general wellness. And I think that comes from starting to go deeper with self-reflection through deeper levels of practice of observation. Like there's behaviors that we have that are not necessarily healthy. Like maybe we tell ourselves that we're not enough, or we tell ourselves that we suck, or we tell ourselves that we need to be more. And then we reflect that onto other people in negative ways. And so are we able to like catch ourselves in those loops and be like, wait, why did I just say this about myself? Or why did I just say this about somebody else? And are we able to observe those behaviors and then start to hold ourselves accountable so that we create healthier types of self-esteem? Then we can reflect that back onto other people. And we then start to improve our general wellness, our awareness as wellness, right? And then from there, that's not an easy step, but when we start to do those things, we can then be able to support others and be vulnerable for others or be strong for others, be a part of a community collective to create things. To if I walk through the door and I close the door on everyone else, that's just me going forward. But if I walk through the door and I leave the door open for the people who are ready to come through with me, right, that changes the dynamic on what's possible. So when we start to look at men are often walking through the door and then closing it behind them, right? They're usually on that very like solo, that solo mission, right? To climb the hill and put the flag in it or whatever. Whereas if men start to realize like their power is within becoming more vulnerable, allowing people in, and also using their power to empower others, most notably empowering women in their lives, giving them opportunities to have a voice or space, creating spaces where women can shine, not just men. And then if men start to hold themselves accountable for their practices, which are often discriminatory, like sexist, misogynist practices, right? With our wording or our priorities. I know plenty of men that would consider themselves a feminist, but would go out and get drunk and try to like scheme women at a bar. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it doesn't add up. So men need to hold men accountable, starting with themselves, go more vulnerable, become more vulnerable, challenge their friends to be more vulnerable, as well as be anti-sexist, and then help facilitate or create or support these scenarios for the women in their lives to have a platform or the opportunity to be themselves or be heard or whatever. And then on the flip side, like I was saying with women, I think physical empowerment does spark some levels of confidence and energy that can lead to, becoming more powerful, and loving themselves more as an entry point. A very quick story. I taught my mom at age 68 how to do push-ups, and unknown to me, she started doing push-ups every single day. And many months later, she tells me how many push-ups she's doing, and it was a very high number. And I was like, holy shit, like, oh my God, I didn't know you've been doing push-ups every day. And she came to me then later after about a year, and she told me, because of the energy and confidence I gained from doing these push-ups, I am now working on this children's book that I've been avoiding writing. Wow. And
that's so cool.
And she said it was because of the push-ups. And I think the push-ups were an entry level thing, right? But then it just gave her the confidence or energy to start to focus on other things. And then she was able to go in that direction.
That's awesome.
And like, how often is that possible for let's just say that for women in general, right? Like if men were always told that they're allowed to play sports and wear certain colors and be strong and do this, but women are kind of told that they're not supposed to do all these things because that's like a boy or that's manly, and they got to fit in a box and dress a certain way. That's disempowering, right?
Yeah.
So how can we empower both to access vulnerability and strength that is the masculine and feminine, let's say, that works together and is balanced and positive? I don't know. I don't have the answers necessarily. Like these are just things that I've been thinking about a lot and trying to see what makes sense.
Yeah, I know. I love where your mind's going with it. And also, by the way, I love your mom. I'm glad she's writing a book. That's so cool. Oh my God. But yeah, I think just like changing that, yes, you're kind of going back into like the individual, on an individual level, how can we begin? Rather than it being like individual, like opportunity, like how can we be more opportunistic for ourselves? It becomes like, how can we value our wellness on an individual level, and look for, growth there. I think that that's definitely a healthier way to look at it, and obviously, you know, begins to lift the collective. And it's funny, I'm reading this book right now too, that just today it mentioned that value and empowerment are directly linked. And when we begin to value something more, we directly empower it more. And when we feel more empowered, our value goes up. And so, and then also down as well. Like if, you know, if we devalue something, we disempower it. And while we're disempowering something, we're lowering the value of it. So I think, you know, just to sort of, maybe my perspective on everything that you're saying is like, maybe if we can just start with our value system and where we're placing value, and we're saying that person is valuable, that person is valuable, I'm valuable, it's all valuable, we're valuable as a community, and what everyone needs is valuable. Having everyone's needs be met, that's valuable too. I think that directly will begin to empower different groups and empower everyone, and also will feel a sense of empowerment individually as well. So no, I just love your take on everything, and I also think that, you know, you obviously have just like these really like in-depth opinions about a lot of this stuff, and but I really think that you're also extremely humble about the communities that you've started, and I think that you really do lead by example, Nate, and I'm proud to know you, and I'm proud to see like all of these things that you just keep continuing to create. And you're, in a way, I feel like you don't even need to speak about these things to show everyone how you feel about them, because it's, the proof is sort of in the pudding. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you, like, if you know, if one, are there any like, is there any like parting phrase or word that you would like to leave everyone off with? And then two, how can everybody get a hold of you? Like where are you at so that people can find you?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I realized over the past, I don't know how many years, several years or so, that if there was one reason why I was put on earth, it was to sort of create community or bring people together. There are other things that I like doing, right? We can do lots of different things, but that would be the one thing that I would continually find myself being a part of, or needing to do, or wanting to do. And within that same concept, an event that we were together on, Leah, which was the Re.Creation Wellness experience we did at Northern Nights Festival. That one was just a little glimpse into where I would like to go with things. It was a very collaborative approach, and everyone making decisions in the process other than me was not a man, which I really enjoyed. Things are just more creative that way, and things get done. As opposed to, there was a lot less arguing. But yeah, my one thing that I continually go back to recently in terms of some words is going back to the language thing. And this isn't necessarily new. People talk about, you know, if you tell yourself that you love yourself and you work on appreciating yourself, you're going to feel better and be happier. And if you tell yourself you're not enough, you're not going to ever feel like you're enough. So the language that we tell ourselves, the story that we tell ourselves, if we start to realize that our diet is more than what we eat, and that our language is part of that diet. And so something that I say often is new language creates new futures. If we start to change our language around various topics, just like you were saying, winning and success, if we change our language around winning and success, and we create new definitions for what that looks like, we will change the future. for ourselves personally and those around us. And then it has a ripple effect, which there's a great book called Emergent Strategy. And Adrienne Marie Brown is the author. She is based currently in Detroit, and she studied under my hero, Grace Lee Boggs, which actually, that's another thing I won't go too far into, but I started realizing that one of the reasons why I was thinking the way that I was thinking is that most of my heroes, I realized, were women in terms of leaders, poets, philosophers, truth speakers, and that started to open up my mind a lot more as well. But anyways, emergent strategy is based in the concept of things don't always have to get done in big ways, meaning sometimes we need 1 million people to march so that we create awareness around something. But at the end of the day, if we have these little collectives that are doing the work on a daily basis, they are the ones that are going to be the seeds that spark the ripple effect for these bigger changes that are going to come later. And she says in the book that rather than having movements that are 1 mile wide and 1 inch deep, she wants to be part of groups that might only be 1 inch wide, but go 1 mile deep. And that's part of her emergent strategy philosophy. And so I think this new language creates new futures as part of that. When we change our language, we begin to change ourselves, and then we have that ripple effect that goes outward. So that's really where my focus is at right now, regardless of what it is that I'm working on.
Okay.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, and go ahead. Where can people find you? Because I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to follow you and connect with you.
Yeah, just so right now, like my Instagram is just Nate Mezmer, Mezmer, and I have someone just called me. Am I still online here? I just declined the call. Sorry. So yeah, my Instagram is Nate Mezmer, Mezmer. A lot of the stuff I post on there right now is more fitness and strength based, as I am also a strength coach. I train and coach individuals, more women than men usually, and I enjoy actually teaching women more than men for a lot of reasons, some of them which we discussed. And I at first I was just a strength coach because I just wanted to make people stronger, but then I realized I'm not really a strength coach. I'm more of an empowerment coach, because I'm not just trying to teach them to get stronger. I want them to look at things differently, and instead of looking at the scale, right? Let's look at how you feel, or are you becoming more athletic, or are you becoming stronger? And anyways, I focus a lot of my stuff on the Instagram there around like strength and empowerment. And I try to impart my philosophy within, let's say, I might post some, workout video, but then in the description, I will write something that's based around my philosophy. That's like looking at things deeper than just like, oh, look at these cool push-ups or something. So generally, like I'm on my personal Instagram, at my personal Instagram, if you look in my bio, there's other Instagrams there, which are just pages that I'm co-collaborating. There's a Westside FitClub, which we were meeting every Saturday prior to pandemic. Now we're meeting every Saturday on Zoom, which is a free Saturday movement and mindfulness collective where sometimes I'll lead like some movement and mobility, and there'll be some sort of a exercise movement. And then Paola, who Leah, Paola will lead a breath work usually at the end, or some sort of mindful movement that she leads. And it's very co-collaborative. It's all levels access. Sometimes my mom even comes on there.
Mm-hmm.
And I have several other things that I'm working on with City Fit Fest, with ALLNESS, with Re.Creation. Those pages are there too. Within ALLNESS, Leah, we should talk soon, because I want to put together some virtual offerings in ways that involve coaching and all the different coaches that sort of embody the different fitness, wellness, mindfulness lanes, and how we can kind of bring that together and then offer that to people virtually, as opposed to just meeting up in person, you know, for a festival or something.
Cool. Yeah, we'll include all of those handles and things in the show notes then. Yeah, I'm excited to see what more you create, Nate. You're just like, you just keep rolling them out. But thank you so much for having this conversation and just, you know, being a different, you know, kind of healthy masculine example. And also I think there's a lot of you that's healthy feminine as well. And I think that, you know, it's really nice to see a living example of that. And yeah, hopefully all you deep chatters out there were able to, you know, get some good perspective shifts here, maybe some food for thought, and really, if anything, learn that, you know, the language really does create future, and if anything, to just be a little more self-aware and personally accountable when it comes to the way that we speak and how we show up. I think that could really help us all. So until next time, Deep Chatters, thanks again for tuning in. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Nate, thanks again. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
To all you deep chatters out there, Leah and I want to thank you so much for listening. This is a podcast that's all about connection, so we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on Instagram at Deep Chats Podcast. And if you haven't already, please go to iTunes to rate and review us. Every review helps other deep chatters just like you be able to find this podcast.